Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome back for another episode. This is the Networking RX podcast. I'm your host, Frank Agin, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. Today I want to talk about, we always talk about networking, but I just want to talk about connections. I guess let me start out by saying this. They say that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. And certainly that's true in a lot of respects. It's certainly true in geometry. That's where we first learn about it. But it's not necessarily true in the networking world, that the shortest distance between two lines, between 2 points is a straight line. You can't necessarily go from point A to point B and be successful. It's not necessarily the straightest point. Logically, linearly, it's the straightest point, but it's not necessarily the most effective path. Here's something that happened the other day. I was talking to an individual. We were kind of doing just kind of a get acquainted. We were just talking about networking, his experiences with it, his philosophies, which aligned much with my philosophies. And he's not an entrepreneurial type. He's more of a corporate type. He's in corporate sales, leads up the corporate sales in a startup. And the boss called him in and said, you know, I appreciate all your efforts and you're doing a great job, but you need to be more targeted in what you're doing. You know, get on LinkedIn and go ahead and find the people we need to be doing business with, reach out to them, pitch them, reel them in, get them in the boat, let's clean them and cook them and eat them, kind of approach. I don't think those are the words. Those are my words, not this particular individual's words or his boss's words. And, you know, he kind of shared with his boss, you know, it doesn't really work that way. That's not necessarily effective. And the boss came back and just said, hey, listen, I don't care about the methods. I just care about the results. So you need to make these results work. You just need to be laser focused, you know, and get after this, you know, take a rifle approach, you know, not a shotgun approach, but let's take a rifle with a laser focus on it, and let's just find the people that we want to go after and go after them. So not to argue with his boss, but knowing that was not the way to do it, certainly is from a sales perspective. But, you know, again, this is, you know, I don't want to argue against this in every situation. You know, there are certain people out there who this is what they do. They get on the phone and I get these calls, you know, financial advisors calling all the time. Hey, this is who I am. Would love some time to sit down with you and your wife, talk about your finances. My wife gets these same calls, and we generally decline. We've got somebody we were using. We've got somebody we've been using for a number of years. Not inclined to even entertain a conversation. But even things that we don't necessarily need, or don't already have covered, we might get those same calls and just don't really have an interest in talking to anybody, to be perfectly honest. And so this sort of happened with the gentleman I was talking about. You know, he kind of knew in his heart this was not what was supposed to be happening. You know, this laser approach sounds good. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. It sounds good, but it doesn't work that way. And if you stop and you think about it, you can get on LinkedIn and you can find out a ton about people. You can find the 100 best prospects for you and set about reaching out to them. You can craft a great pitch, whether you're just trying to get them to engage on email, engage on LinkedIn, get a phone call with them. You can try that. Generally speaking, what's going to end up happening, and I've tried it. Trust me, I've tried it. I've tried all sorts of things. out of 100 people, you might get 2 or 3 to engage with you. Engage with you to the point. I mean, it's literally you'll get 94 people that won't respond at all. They just won't respond at all, and that's fine. That's their prerogative. It's not, you're not putting a call into somebody and expecting a call back, or these are just total strangers. I call a family member, I call a friend, email a family member or a friend. I kind of expect a courtesy of something back. Even, hey, I'm busy. I'll get back to you later. But in this situation where it's just a cold outreach, 94% of the people, 95% of the people, 95% of the people aren't going to respond at all. You're going to get 2 of those 100, 2%, 2 or 3 of those 100 that are going to be brazen enough to basically let you have it. No, don't do business this way. Get me off your list. I've heard all sorts of things like that. And again, that's their prerogative. It's not they don't want to be pestered in this way. They don't want me to continually be doing that. And I generally respect that. I'll generally try and pull them off my list somehow or another. It might be even just disconnecting with them on LinkedIn. And to be honest, I don't do a lot of this cold outreach anymore. I've just found a different way. I'll kind of get into that different way here in a minute. So 95% don't respond. 3% are going to let you have it. 3 out of the 100. Keep the numbers easy. That leaves with 2 people who are going to respond and be open to engaging in some sort of conversation. And of those 2, you're not going to close 2. It's not, you're just going to have a conversation with 2, right? I mean, it's, if your closing rate is 30%, there's a 30% chance that those 2 people will close, and you really, we got to pull the numbers out, expand the numbers out. And so for every 10 people you have a conversation with, which means that you probably need to be sending out 500, maybe more, you're ultimately going to close. And the numbers probably aren't even that good, depending upon what you're selling. And so it's a lot of, it's a lot of effort. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of getting your hat handed to you by people who are brazen enough to tell you to leave them alone. It's a lot of being ignored for not necessarily a positive outcome. And that's the A to B approach. And that's what this particular boss was basically telling him to do. We need more sales. We need more whatever they were trying to accomplish. We need more sponsors. We need more investors. Whatever it is, just get out there. We can find the people. We know who the people are, but just reach out to them. The problem is that when you reach out to somebody, when you reach out to those 100 people, you know who they are, but it doesn't mean you have a relationship with them. Well, you don't have a relationship with them. It's literally a cold outreach. And so you're going to have a situation where you're reaching out to people and they don't know who you are. They have no clue. And there's a lot of people out there doing this sort of thing, and they're not inclined to, even though you want 5 minutes of their time or 10 minutes of their time, they have lots of people asking for 5, 10 minutes of their time. And the only thing different about what you have to offer, or what I have to offer relative to them, is we're just pretty confident in what we do, and we can't really speak to the other people. We in our heads can assume that the other people who are doing this cold outreach have a more nefarious type of approach, or aren't selling what we're selling, don't have a noble heart like we have a noble heart. But we don't know, and they don't know. The people we're reaching out to, they don't know. They just know it's one more person who wants 10 more minutes of their time, and they're not inclined to necessarily give it. And so you end up with two people that you can talk with and a 30% chance that something will happen with that. And it might be less depending upon what the closing rate is. What I find is the quickest way, the most effective way, I don't know if it's necessarily the quickest way, and maybe it is the quickest way, but most effective, is to work through connections. So if you've got these 100 people and you start working through connections and having those connections connect you to other people who, you're obviously describing along the way what you're looking for. This is what we're laser focused on. And someone might say to me, geez, I don't know anybody like that. Okay, do you know somebody who might know somebody like that? And they might say, I just don't really know. Well, do you know somebody who might know somebody who might know somebody? And I know it gets comical, but it goes back to my golf analogy. So when you're standing on the tee, 415 yards away, dogleg right, you're not trying to drop it in the cup. You're just trying to hit it down the fairway as far and straight as you can to set yourself up for a great second shot. And when you have that great second shot, you're looking for, you're looking to make that great second shot, get on the green, and then two putt. Same sort of thing. It's just, is there somebody who you think might get me closer to this? And sure enough, introductions happen, and you're being introduced from one person to the next, to the next, to the next. And ultimately, somebody says, hey, I do know the person who you would otherwise be directly going to. They're my neighbor. They're a former coworker. They're a friend from college. There's somebody I know well enough that I could make an introduction. I could introduce you to. Great. And so you kind of go from there, and you're introduced to that particular person who may be one of the two people out of the 100. Chances are you're going to end up with more than the two out of 100. But the interesting thing is that you have kind of borrowed the trust of the person who's introducing you. Now, obviously, along the way, you're building relationships with people. You're talking to people. You're finding out ways that you can help them. It can't all be about you, but you're building relationships along the way. And the particular person who says, my former college roommate is the perfect person for you to talk to. They're one of your, they're not using this term, but just how I'm describing them. They're one of your laser focused targets. And sure enough, you get an introduction, and John is introducing you to Rob. And because John is a good friend of Rob is going to give you more than 10 minutes. You're going to get on the phone. Hey, how did John and Rob meet? Play pleasantries, just kind of talking about one another. You have literally borrowed that person's trust enough to get in there and talk to them about what you have. And I don't know that necessarily increases the odds that they're going to buy. And it obviously depends upon what you're selling. If it's something that there's a need for, that there is not currently being covered, or there's not a deficiency in how it's being covered, it might not go anywhere. That you're not going to close 100% of the people on this laser focused list anyway. But they may refer you to other people, and you don't know where it's going to go. I mean, at least you're on that person's radar should the incumbent firm doing whatever, payroll, benefits, whatever it might be, should they stub their toe, you're going to be on the list of people to call, and that's a great place to be. If you're not number one, the number two is really a great place to be, because you're the one that calls when something goes wrong. And I don't want to say things generally go wrong, but the odds are eventually something will happen, whatever that is. But the point is this: if you take the A to B approach, you are approaching people without any trust at all. You've got to kind of break through. You've got to break through a gatekeeper. You've ultimately got to be connected with somebody, and you are talking with them, and they don't know you from Adam. and you've got to establish some sort of trust with them. Whereas if you take the non-A-B approach, let's call it the ACDEFGHIJKLMNOP approach, when you're ultimately connected to that person on that laser targeted list, you're walking in with a degree of trust. And that certainly can vary depending upon how well of a relationship you've built with the person who's ultimately introducing you, and that takes some work. But once you're able to finally talk to the people on your laser focused list, you have that trust. And that's huge. That's huge for building a relationship with that person. So in the end, it might take a little more work, but it becomes a whole lot more effective relative to trying to grow a business. I'm certainly not saying you can't be racing out there and taking the A to B approach. Sure, go ahead. But ultimately you get busy enough that you don't have time for that. I took the A-B approach for years, reaching out to people on LinkedIn, not having great results. And when I took something that was other than that, just asking for introductions to somebody that fit this avatar, this profile I'd put together, and if you don't know who they are, maybe there's somebody who knows who they are, it's become much more effective. And I've become so busy with calls and talking to people, and many of them prospects, that I find myself not really going back to the A-B approach, because it's you can kind of keep yourself pretty busy with decent introductions from other people. So let me go back to this original story where this development guy for this startup's got this boss saying, "Hey, listen, we need you to be laser focused." Well, he was trying to figure out what to do, and coincidentally, or fortunately, he got called into the boss's office less than a week later, and the boss said, "Hey, we just closed on this 800-person deal that you sent our way, that you brought in. How did that happen?" And that allowed this particular development person, salesperson, to explain to the boss that it was really multiple steps along the way, starting with somebody who he had known from a previous job or going to college, that really was not connected to their space at all, but through a series of connections connected them to the right people. So it's really not, he basically showed the boss, it's not this A-B approach that you're looking at. We have to kind of be more strategic about this. We have to have a longer view if we're going to be successful. And that allowed the boss then to kind of come to grips with what had been happening. Wow, okay, I see what you're doing is working. How do we make it work better? How can I get more comfortable with it? Because it can take a little longer to make that cycle work. Anyhow, before we wrap up, it's a great segue. If you know of somebody who would like to be part of our team, help us expand AmSpirit Business Connections, I would appreciate an introduction. I would appreciate borrowing your trust to get in the door, to have an opportunity to talk to them. And they may not ultimately be the person, and that's fine. We share about the opportunity. If they're interested, we get them more details. If they know of somebody, they pass us on. And I stop and look at a lot of the new franchisees we have, and that's really been where they've come from. It's just people introducing one person to the next. Just to let you know, this franchise opportunity is something that entrepreneurs and sales reps can add on to what they're already doing. So we are looking for that small business person, that entrepreneur who has a great deal of control over their daily lives, who would like to add on to what they're doing, this franchise opportunity, and create a second stream of income. If you know of someone, if you're that someone, reach out to me using my email, or connect me by emailing them and copying me on that email. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AMSPIRIT.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.